Parker, who should I go to for reliable information that's factual and definitely correct?
I hear that the Swoosh is always pretty reliable and well informed.
Well, come on, Parker. Which YouTuber is always correct and never gets things wrong?
Well, I get all of my information from David Display's model Behaviour.
You serious?
Hello Marvel Legends and welcome to another episode of Displaying Model Behavior. And before we get started, I want to let you know that I've created a second YouTube channel, David Displays Miscellaneous Behavior, in which I talk about anything that is not action figure related. So movies, comic books, video games, pro wrestling is going to be a big one. Anything that doesn't fit under the direct banner of action figures, I'm going to have on my second channel. So I'll put a little link to that in the description below. And please join it, make a secondary community to this one, so that if you just want action figures, this is the place to go. And for any other mad ramblings, you can go on over to the other channel. So enough of these mad ramblings, let's talk about why we're here. This is a list of all the controversial figures that are unlikely to be made as Marvel Legends for whatever reason. To compile this list, I went out to the various Marvel Facebook groups and I just said, guys, help me out here. What figures are we unlikely to get as Marvel Legends for whatever crazy reasons you want? And this is what they came back with, guys. So let's do it. The first character we're going to mention is Nightwatch. Nightwatch, a classic obscure character from the 90s. And why would he not get made as a legend? Well, just take a look at him. He's got a cool, badass look, which looks very much like a certain other gothic, cool, badass character from the early 90s. Yes, Nightwatch came out just as Todd McFarlane was blowing up with Spawn over at Image Comics, and the resemblance is uncanny. Whether it's intentional or not, Nightwatch does look like a poor man's version of Spawn, nay, a complete ripoff. So it's unlikely that we will get a Marvel Legend that looks so uncannily like Todd McFarlane's creation. Is that the case? Who knows? But it seems like a fair bet that they would go for other figures that are not such IP copyright issues just waiting to happen. But from what we've been told, and again, this is just rumor and nonsense and internet hearsay, but apparently Kevin Feige is a big fan of Nightwatch, go figure. So you never know, we might have someone in a position of power pushing for this obscure character. And I hope that we do get him, because I want to complete my Maximum Carnage teams, and I'm a child of the 90s, so that means a lot to me. And Nightwatch did appear for a cup of coffee in Maximum Carnage on Spider-Man's side, so if we can get him, I'll be a happy chappy. A debatable little one that might come up or might not is Star Fox. Star Fox is the brother of Thanos. And the thing is, his power set and his kind of personality have not aged well, I suppose you could say. He has the ability to excite the pleasure centers of people's minds and be able to manipulate them and kind of have his way with them. And that's not cool, if you kind of know what I'm saying. Like a character whose power is essentially to be able to roofie someone. I think that, when it was designed and they came up with it in the 80s or whenever he came out, they were like, this is a fun Playboy type character. But now that we're like a little bit more sort of self-aware, it's like, that's got some unpleasant kind of connotations to the idea of that. So will we see a Star Fox figure? Maybe, but I wouldn't be surprised if they perhaps in the future in Marvel Comics, if they haven't done already, maybe play around with his powers a little bit so that it's not quite so creepy. The next potential character that we might not see is She-Hulk. I know what you're thinking. We've already got two figures of her. We've got the grey one and the green one that's coming out. But there is also the most classic design, which is with her purple and white leotard jumpsuit type thing. And the only reason that people think we might not get that is because it's a little bit sexualized, a little bit risque. Hulk is all about hips, lips, and fingertips. And people are believing that Hasbro are trying to kind of tone down the sexuality of their characters. Whether that's true or not, a lot of people seem to think that, the sort of big, busty, kind of voluptuous sort of Hulk is one that we probably won't see. Is that true? Is that not? Who knows? I know I would love to get that figure. Will we get it made? The jury seems to be out at the moment. Our next entry is one that people could literally write books about, because they have. And that's Neil Gaiman's Miracle Man or Man of Miracles. So before it was Neil Gaiman's Miracle Man, it was Alan Moore who made the character most famous in the 80s. However, that character was based on a character created in the 1950s who then got confused and copyright messed up with DC and their Captain Marvel, who became Shazam. And then that was when Alan Moore sort of took inspiration of that character for his Miracle Man. And I have to make edits into my videos to try and correct the incorrect information, which is probably in itself now, this is incorrect, and I've got to draw a line somewhere. I'm not doing any more edits, despite how tumultuous this information might be. I need to go wiki this, but either way, it serves as a perfect example as to just how convoluted these copyright issues are. Which now, I believe, is technically owned by Marvel, is a Marvel property, but my goodness, this thing has passed through so many intellectual copyright holders' hands. It is up in the air as to who is allowed to make what for who right now. So we've had a Todd McFarlane, Man of Miracles, Miracle Man, whatever you want to call him. But now it would seem that Marvel do own the character. They own that property and license. But whether or not they would be able to actually make any kind of figure regarding it, who knows? Now, Miracle Man was quite a hardcore comic book. That was pretty brutal and pretty adult. So let's go in the complete opposite direction with this next one. Santa Claus. Yep, Santa Claus is an actual character, an existing real creature in the 616. He's a mutant, from what I understand, and he has appeared in various stories. He's even had tussles with the devil and all sorts of things, and I kind of love that. It's completely goofy and bonkers, but in the Marvel 616, Santa Claus does exist. And then, of course, the Christmas traditions were all built up around this sort of godlike, kind of like Thor type figure. People believe that he's a fictional creation, but actually he does exist. But the likelihood of us getting a Marvel Legends Santa Claus seems pretty remote, which is a shame because anyone can make a Santa Claus toy. I don't think there's no copyright for that. I don't think. Lord knows how many Santa Claus things you see. It must be available to anyone to use. But will we get a Marvel Legends one? Highly unlikely. Would I love a Marvel Legends one? Absolutely. Now, this is a real random one, and one of the reasons why I love putting things out to the community. Crystar. Ever heard of that? I hadn't. My knowledge was not that good, but this was a character and a comic book that was created by Marvel. This is a Marvel creation, but the character was licensed out to Remco to make toys and various other things. And since then, the character's rights and property have been kind of up in the air as to who owns what and who's allowed to make this, that, and the other. So maybe there aren't a huge amount of people crying out for a Crystar figure, but if they were, they probably would be out of luck because the rights to this thing are all up in the air. Now, another figure that I almost forgot to add to the initial list is, of course, let me change the lighting for this, the devil. Or more appropriately, I'm talking about Mephistopheles. Now, technically, if you want to split hairs, he's not Satan, he is a demon lord of the underworld, but come on, we all know what we're talking about here. You can dress it up by any other name. He is the devil. And do Disney want to make a devil action figure? That's the question. And a lot of people are saying, well, maybe that's why we haven't seen Mephisto yet. We've had a badass looking Select Mephisto, which I really kind of want because it does look good, but we haven't had a Legends one yet. Now, of course, the running joke at the moment while WandaVision is on is everyone's going, that's Mephisto, she's Mephisto, he's Mephisto. We might get Mephisto in the MCU. We don't know, but as it stands right now, it would make sense that Marvel and Disney want to kind of steer away from anything that's too satanic because that's not really fitting in with their brand. But you never know. So I would love to see one, especially because Mephisto is so tied into a lot of Spider-Man's recent lore and history for the worse. But still, that's a video for another time. But will we see a Mephisto figure? I think unlikely. But if I'm wrong, then I'll be kind of happy because I'd like to add him to the collection. Now we've got a whole can of worms we're going to open up here with Amalgam. Yep, come on, kids of the 90s, we all remember Amalgam comics when Marvel and DC were like, what can we do? Because we're kind of struggling here. We've killed Superman, we've cloned Spider-Man, what's next? Amalgam, the crossover of the Marvel and DC universes. That was what happened. It was a 5-issue miniseries or 4-issue miniseries, and the fans could vote on what characters would win in what fights. It was fun, it was bonkers. But then at the end of the story, the two universes merged into the Amalgam universe, and we got such mashup characters as Darkclaw, who was a combination of Wolverine and Batman. We had Super Soldier, who was Captain America and Superman. It just lasted for one issue each just to be this fun little bit of nonsense. It was crazy, it was wacky, and we had some really fun designs out of it. But the odds of Disney and Warner Brothers ever working together again, highly unlikely at this stage, which is a real shame. That's why we don't get Marvel and DC comic crossovers anymore. I used to love those. Those were so much fun. We'd have, Batman meets Spider-Man and JLA versus Avengers. Not anymore. Not in the world we live in now. So the chances of getting a badass Darkclaw action figure, highly unlikely. And sticking with Amalgam, I could just run through all the Amalgam characters, but that's lazy. But there is one in particular who I think is worth noting, and that is Access. There was a character called Access who was literally like a combination of the Marvel universe and the DC universe. He was this young lad who could jump between the two dimensions, and he was like the one original creation from this universe, which did actually carry on. After the initial miniseries, there were further crossover Access comics in which he starred. So he's like the one standout character who was the epitome of the Marvel versus DC Amalgam storyline. But unfortunately, again, way too complicated a rights issue to ever see him in Marvel Legends form. A very popular one that got mentioned a lot is Rom Space Knight. And this is one that I'm totally baffled about. So he is a Marvel character, he was created in Marvel Comics, but he seems to have this crossover licensing with Transformers and G.I. Joe. He seems to appear there more prominently, and it's one of those rare instances where Marvel perhaps created the character but don't fully own the rights to this, that, and the other. It's a real viper's nest of IP lore and all sorts of different things. So Marvel kind of owns him for some things, but not for others. Rom Space Knight is a very popular character, though. I just know this because a lot of people mentioned him and said that they would like to see him in Marvel Legends form. He's got kind of a fun, quirky, iconic design, but yes, he jumps across Transformers, G.I. Joe, and Hasbro do own those toy properties, but then different comic book companies own the rights to publishing those, and it's a whole thing. So the chances are they're just going to go, you know what? We're not going to touch this one. So from what I understand, Rom is a Hasbro property, but Marvel have included him in numerous comic books, but also now he appears in IDW comic books, and there's a movie in the works that's being licensed through Hasbro. So it's all a little bit crazy, and I wouldn't even know where to begin. Now this next one, similar to Rom Space Knight, is Death's Head. Although I will say, off the bat, Death's Head is owned by Marvel, from what I understand. But when he was originally created, he was made for the Transformers comics, and there was a licensing deal there where any character who was introduced in the Transformers comics would be owned by that copyright holder. So what the writer did, I believe it was Simon Furman maybe, he did like a one-page strip in a Marvel comic with Death's Head so they could put their stamp, boom, he appeared there in Marvel first, so Marvel retained some of those rights. And since then, Marvel have used him more and more and more, but he has been alluded to in modern Transformers comics that aren't tied in with Marvel. So it's an interesting little copyright sort of story. But we've had Death's Head too. So a lot of people, myself included, because cyborgs are awesome, are crying out for an original Death's Head figure. Will we get him? Hopefully. Can we get him? Definitely. Will Hasbro do it? Maybe. Another figure that I know a lot of people would like to see, myself included, is Conan. I would love Conan for my Savage Avengers team. That would be so cool. Unfortunately, that's a character whose licensing rights are all sort of up in the air. It would seem that Marvel do own the rights for the comic book appearances. So Marvel can make comic book appearances with Conan, no problem. But the toy licensing side, that's more up in the air. Similar with the movie licensing. And that's where things get a little bit confusing and the water gets a bit muddy, is different companies can license out different types of merchandise. So Marvel's covered for the comics, but a different toy company owns the toy action figure license for Conan. So unfortunately, as cool as it would be, we probably won't get a Conan Marvel Legend. Now, this is one that actually started this whole debate in my mind. There is a YouTube channel, I forget the name off the top of my head, but I will include it when I edit this video together. And the guy who makes it used to work in the action figure industry. And he said that the reason we haven't yet got a Cardiac figure, which is a figure I would love to have, because Cardiac's from the 90s, that's what I grew up with, he's a Spider-Man character, I would love Cardiac. But the reason it's not gonna happen, apparently, is because Eric Larson had a unique deal with Marvel when he was writing and drawing characters, that he would get some subsidiary money and royalties if those characters were to be used in different media. Eric Larson created Cardiac, therefore, if Hasbro want to make a Cardiac figure, they got to pony up some dough to Eric Larson. Now, when I mentioned this, I said so clearly, like, this is just what I heard from this dude, and people were like, that's stupid. That would mean that they can't make Venom because Todd McFarlane made Venom, or Eric Larson made this, or they can't use that. And I'm like, I'm just saying what I heard. Plus, it says it was a specific, different deal. I guess maybe back in the 90s, in the early 90s, comic book creators could, make their deals more specific to them if they had good bargaining power. I don't know, but that was what I heard. And it does make sense because Cardiac is a wonderfully toyetic figure, and they could kit bash him so easily. I mean, come on, Hasbro, you've got an easy figure that you can just throw out there with a quick repaint, but they haven't done it yet. And I hope that they do. I hope that they find a way. But if they don't, it could be because they would have to pay Eric Larson more money. And you know what? They don't want to do that. Linking perfectly to the Cardiac controversy, true or not, some more fuel to that fire is, of course, what happened with Rob Liefeld and Cable and Deadpool. There was a whole different issue rights going on there, because for a short time in the 2000s, Marvel sort of fell out with Rob Liefeld. Yeah, can you believe it? And they could not use Cable and Deadpool because Liefeld owned some copyrights with those characters. So instead, we got the amazing, Agent X and Soldier X, who were definitely not Deadpool and Cable, but they were Marvel's versions of them, which they could, were legally distinct. But that was what they had to do because they couldn't use Cable and Deadpool. And eventually it all got figured out. And Soldier X and Agent X were turned into completely different characters and became kind of parody. At least Agent X became a bit of a parody. But that was an issue with a creator having a very different contract to many of the other people. So that's another thing that we probably won't see. We probably won't see a Soldier X or an Agent X action figure because it's probably harkening back to a point of Marvel history where they're like, nah, we don't need to remind people about that. And finally, just for giggles, there is the NFL Super Pro. I haven't read this, but it is a sort of classic oddity of the comic book history, is the NFL Super Pro comic. Is he an American footballer? Is he a superhero? We don't know, but he's kind of a mashup of both. And considering that this is another one of those split licensing type things with Marvel and the NFL, it's just those awkward IP contract type waters that they probably don't want to get into. And to be honest, I don't want to speak for everyone in the world, but I don't know how many people are clamoring for an NFL Super Pro figure. Obviously, if they made it, I'd buy it because that's just where I am now. And folks, those were my top however many figures it was that we probably won't get because of licensing issues or copyright or appropriateness or anything else in between. I think the two reasons I made this list was, first of all, it's fun content, and secondly, I love the debate. So if I'm completely wrong about any of these things, comment below, let me know. It's probably not so much fun telling me I'm wrong because I'm one of those people who's like, yeah, I guess I probably am. Thanks for telling me. There's not much of an argument to be had. But yeah, do let me know if I was way off base about anything, or more to the point, more interestingly, let me know if there are any other figures that you think it's highly unlikely we're going to get as action figures because of some controversy or some issue or this or that would make Hasbro or Marvel go like, ooh, maybe we won't touch that one. That's probably for the best. But yeah, let me know what you think. And guys, until next time, don't forget to check out the other channel as well, because that's going to be really good fun. I want to plug that, but not make it obnoxious. Too late. So yeah, if you're into wrestling, video games, movies, anything else like that that's not action figure related, go check out David Displays Miscellaneous Behavior. And until next time, keep displaying model behavior.
Chill.